How you doing? I'm Mark Stewart, prep editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Welcome to another edition of Preps Plus Extra. Joining me on this very cold afternoon in short sleeves, that's how tough he is.
That's right.
Is J.R. Radcliffe, sports editor and now newspaper.
I can't do long sleeves. I feel too constricted. So even when it's Antarctica outside, I have to have this going on. Lots of layers though.
Yeah, well, it's one of the tough guys of the media profession.
Yeah,
yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, so it's another very interesting week of prep sports, probably for the wrong reasons. The big news in the last week has been, the arrest on marijuana possession of 4 Germantown basketball players,
right.
And subsequently those guys sat out their game against Whitefish Bay last Friday, and who knows, they'll probably have some ongoing suspension. For at least a few games. Official word hasn't come out yet, but rather than kind of get into all the details of the investigation and what because we don't really know a lot of this stuff is what the police is really ongoing. All we know is what the police report says. So, but from our perspective, I guess it kind of puts us in a unique situation where in high school sports, we really don't have a lot of times to deal with guys getting arrested or
right.
this side of journalism and it kind of presents some unique situations of how you have to handle these things, because a lot of times these people might be minors or things just haven't been released yet. But share with me a little bit your perspective on when you're dealing with high school athletes and trouble kind of comes along.
Yeah.
What's your, how do you handle those situations?
Yeah, it's tough. It's the most delicate thing we deal with, and it's no fun for us, but at the same time, our job isn't just to go to games and report only the good things. You have to serve your readers in a way that gives them the whole picture, and if the readers are interested in something, it's your job as a writer to go out and give them that story, or at least serve them and give them the information they need to know. The first thing you touched on, we have to make sure when something like this comes up, what we're allowed to say when you're dealing with minors. Not even I'm aware of all the rules. They kind of change a lot in terms of what you can say when information becomes public, things like that. So that's the first thing you have to sort through. And then the second thing is you kind of have to just accept the fact that there is going to be a double standard, and you're going to have people upset about fairness issues when they say, well, 3 weeks ago there was a kid who was arrested. Why wasn't his name in the paper? Things like that. The fact is, when you are a high-profile athlete, even though you're only 18 years old, you are at a different standard when it comes to something like this. There's going to be a report of that if you're a key basketball player for the best basketball program in the area. That's going to be in the newspaper, whereas another kid who is a third string guy for a team that isn't as high profile isn't going to get that level of coverage, and that's unfair. I struggle with that, but the fact of the matter is that's how it is. When you get a scholarship to a big program, that's going to increase your level of notoriety to a point where something like this is going to become newsworthy. If it's newsworthy, the story belongs in the newspaper for us. And not only do you have to struggle with the issues of what's fair and what's right for the kids themselves and for their families, but you also have to consider too, especially with what we do with the Weekly, and it's more niche publication, you're serving very small communities. You could, the more you write could endanger your relationships with your sources and with your readers, because you have usually a good working relationship with a coach on a week-to-week basis. I talk to coaches pretty much every week. Well, now you're reporting on their kid and giving them a bad name, both as the kid, as the program. That's difficult to work with too, because you have to sort of establish that relationship, and yet you have to be friendly but not so friendly. It's a very complex, very complicated issue. Yeah,
and I was at the game Friday night, and afterward Germantown coach Steve Showalter, who happens to be a police officer in that community, he answered some questions, and to your point where you talk about the relationships and things. I mean, I think he particularly got why we had to ask this or that question. He didn't have a lot to say, but he kind of understood the process. The one thing that at least at the Journal-Sentinel we were kind of debating about until we realized all these athletes were 18 is, okay, well, do we name them? Because not all of them were charged. I mean, some of them were just cited.
Right.
And I think one of our policies is, well, if you're not really charged with a crime, that we don't use your name. So that for a while there was a chance that maybe there was only going to be one of the people named and 3 other teammates, and we would have had to kind of work around that dicey issue, because obviously when people are watching the game, they're like, okay, well, I know this guy and this guy and this guy
Right.
aren't playing.
Right.
Why wouldn't they be named?
Yeah, and sometimes you don't have a story in the paper, but everybody in the community knows what's going on. So you don't want to look like you're behind. Obviously people are going to games, they see these guys are in street clothes, they know something's up, you know something's up. You should be able to connect those dots. Right,
and the other thing you have to be careful of in legal situations is, you got to avoid the rumor mill, so
Definitely,
to speak. Right now, a lot of the stuff that was reported off that incident came off of a police report, which is really the police's account of that incident. So we really don't know what the player's, excuse was, and there are a lot of questions we don't know. Was everyone in the car smoking? Who did it belong to? There are a lot of things that have not been explained that you just can't go and say, hey. You gotta. I guess my point is you gotta kind of avoid the whole rumor mill of it as much as possible. And in those cases, I look at what the police had to say and what the charge is, and just stick with that and try to leave any innuendo out of it, because you don't know what's going to happen in the legal process.
Bringing it back to the basketball part of this, we talked about how tough that corner of the postseason bracket is. Now you have to say that's a little bit more up in the air. Germantown could still be seen as the favorite, even without some of their key players, but let's say those players don't come back this year. Now you got a lot of teams in that section. I'm thinking of Kettle Moraine, I'm thinking of Arrowhead, Sussex Hamilton, Homestead. Those are all teams that are going to be wanting to lay claim to that part of the sectional. So it's definitely added intrigue on the court to what comes throughout the rest of the season. Obviously, when they come back is going to be a big deal.
Right. And shifting gears to what we like to talk about more, which is the actual basketball season. Milwaukee South boys basketball team had a close victory over Bradley Tech this past week, and here's what Coach Ty Mosler and one of his players had to say about the win.
Every city game is like that. You can be up 15 or 20 and think that it's over, and it never is. There's other coaches in the conference that we joke about it with, that they city teams in general can't put people away, and the other teams, get some energy when they were down 15, and all of a sudden they cut it to 7 or 8 because of a few mistakes by the team that's up by 15, and now it's a game. And again, they cut it down to one possession. And the one good thing that our kids did do is they made their free throws in the last couple minutes to keep them arm's length away.
What it really was is, in the first half, we had our intensity, but then when the second half came, we really didn't come out as we were supposed to. Then that's what made them get that lead. But what really got us back into the game, it was our free throws and our teammates. Like, we stuck together as a team and kept doing what we were supposed to do.
Well, that was Coach Ty Mosler and senior Matt Williams talking about the win over Tech. And, we get to this time of year, we're creeping into February, and, conference races are starting to kind of heat up. And, when I look at Milwaukee South, they're one of those teams that you don't really think about in terms of, they don't have the, statewide reputation of a King or Riverside right now. But that's a pretty good team. They took King over double overtime. Lost to Milwaukee Hamilton, which is still undefeated in overtime as well. And that's one of those teams that, people in the city conference know, South is one of those teams you can never overlook, because Ty Mosler is really one of the better coaches in the area, and just in terms of getting his guys ready. So that's one of those teams as we move forward. You might not hear much about them now, but maybe in a month or so, they might be knocking someone off in the postseason. But there are a lot of teams out there like that. As we move into February, who are some of those teams that maybe are a little under the radar right now?
I think if I look at Division II, for example, Pewaukee, they have a bracket where New Berlin Eisenhower has been kind of the top dog all season. Eisenhower beat Pewaukee earlier this year. In fact, Pewaukee has a couple what I guess you could call questionable losses, but the Pirates are always well coached, always a team that finds a way to compete at the end of the year. And Eisenhower, there's a blueprint out there now how to shut down Reed Timmer, who scores 33 points per game, went in against Shorewood, and Shorewood used a defense where they had 2 guys on him the whole game, held him to 2 points, and Shorewood ended up winning that game by 10. So now it's, maybe there's a way to actually pull this off and beat Eisenhower. That was only their second loss of the season. Pewaukee's in the same grouping in the postseason with Eisenhower, and so those two teams look like kind of the top dogs there. maybe Pewaukee can sneak past them and get deeper into the tournament. Very balanced team. I've talked about Eric Lutzen, their big man, before. A lot of good guard play. Jordan Haas comes to mind, but they've got a new guy leading them pretty much every night. I see that on the boys' side as a team that's tough to stop. On the girls' side, Whitefish Bay just got a huge victory. Took out Germantown in overtime. Now they're tied for the North Shore Conference lead with Germantown. Maya Jonas has been one of the best players in the area, maybe as All Suburban goes for the Now Newspapers coverage area, the best player in the area. I think she had more than 20 points, 20 rebounds in that game against Germantown, and she's an X factor that a lot of teams can't account for. Again, in Division II, that's a team that could get all the way to the sectional final and beyond very easily. Yeah,
and you're talking about Division II. On the boys' side, that sectional in our neck of the woods is pretty loaded, and Milwaukee Mesmer, I believe, they're Division II, the school this year. They're off to a great start. They're only, in fact, they beat New Berlin Eisenhower over Christmas break. So that's one of those teams that, maybe just because they're a little smaller school and they play in a small conference, they don't get as much attention. And Brookfield Academy is having a really good season, and they probably haven't been getting the love, quote unquote, that maybe they think they deserve. But that's a team in Division III that's you got to look at and say, that's a squad that has a chance to make some noise in the postseason.
Yeah, a lot of Clarys there. Sean and Ryan, the players, and their dad, Pat Clary, the coach. So they've been doing very well for several years. Sean Clary, I believe, is going to play in college basketball, Division II. So they're very talented.
Yeah, Michigan Tech. Michigan Tech is where Sean is headed. But we'll talk about sleepers more next week. We'll talk about more big games. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Preps Plus Extra. For more Preps Plus action, be sure to watch me and Lance Allen every Sunday night on TMJ4. Take care.